Morning peeps, good morning everyone, how's everyone doing? Hopefully you guys are all doing well. Don't forget, if you're new to the channel, like, share, subscribe. Loads of fights coming up on the weekend, loads. Obviously Boxer have their fight card, Chris Smith versus Richard Riatport, good undercard as well. I think I'm going to go to that fight card, by the way. DAZN have theirs, Subriel Matias versus Liam Parrow, and obviously PBC have theirs, Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin. So look, 3 really good main events, good undercard fights on all of them. Obviously, the main one is Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin, just because it's Gervonta Davis. But the fight I'm looking forward to the most across all 3 cards has to be Benavidez versus Gvozdyk. Really can't wait for that one. I think it's intriguing. Obviously, Benavidez going up to 175 pounds for the first time. He probably still will be the bigger guy, but he'll be fighting guys relatively his same size. Gvozdyk's a big guy as well. And let's not forget, Ukrainian fighters right now are on a roll, big time. Berenchik beating Navarrete. Loma going to Australia, beating Kambosos, showing everyone he's still got it. And obviously the big one, Oleksandr Gvozdyk beating Tyson Fury. So I would not rule out a Gvozdyk upset here. I wouldn't. But look, regardless, whoever wins that fight is right there in the position if Beterbiev doesn't come back in time to fight Dmitry Bivol. So look, big fight, and can't wait for it. Let's focus though on Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin. Good to see Tank back in the ring. It's been a long time. We haven't seen him since Ryan Garcia. And obviously that was a humongous fight. In terms of sort of money, bums on seats, it was the biggest fight of last year. But seeing Tank once a year just isn't good enough. It isn't. You could make an argument to say he is the face of boxing. I mean, he's right in the top 3 or 4. But the face of boxing needs to fight more than once a year. You need to, right? I mean, Fury's giving you fights, Canelo's giving you fights, AJ's giving you fights. Unfortunately, Tank isn't. He isn't. And I know there's, personal problems outside the ring, which have just seemed to have followed him his whole career. But hopefully, at 29, he can just put that to the side and kick on, because he has all the potential to really be enormous superstar. I'm saying someone that reaches that 1 million pay-per-view mark all the time. He's got everything. I've watched all the build-up, and he's funny. When he gets serious, he gets serious. He's just an entertaining guy. And now that he does all the talking and, Ellaby and Floyd don't do much talking, I think we're starting to see he can handle that. He can handle being in the spotlight. He can handle the camera being shoved in his face. He's good. He's good. So look, hopefully if he gets past Frank Martin, which I think he will, relatively easy, by the way. Hopefully we see him again by the end of the year. I kind of doubt it, but who knows? I think this fight's all about Frank Martin. I really do. Like, I know what Gervonta is going to do because we've seen Gervonta do it. I know people like to dig him that he's not fought a lot of the elite guys, but even when he fights the elite guys, we see how he performs. Leo Santa Cruz was an elite fighter, albeit maybe not the fighter he was a couple of years ago, but we saw it. Ryan Garcia came into that ring as not an elite fighter, but a world-class fighter. And I know a lot of you are going to say he drained him, but we even saw what Tank did there in terms of setting up his shots. He's a very good fighter, an elite fighter. Frank Martin isn't that. Frank Martin isn't that. And this is not a dig at Frank Martin. I was just watching his last fight against, I know I'm going to butcher this name, Artem Haratunian, I think it is. I think that's his name. Unbeaten German. By the way, good amateur record himself, Olympic bronze medalist back in 2016. So he came to the ring with something, right? I was watching that fight, and Frank was lucky to win that fight. Frank was lucky to win that fight. I think the ringside commentators had it to Artem. They had it even with the knockdown in round 12, or the fact that Artem took a knee. They still had it to Artem. So Frank was lucky to kind of get away with a W. But in that fight, he showed me once he took a step up that there are so much things that he still needs to work on. Like he's fighting on the back foot isn't good. I feel like when he does put his punches in bunches, he can look good. When he's there trying to think and trying to box, then I feel like he just looks, he looks like he's a 6'7" at most things. And unfortunately, a 6'7" at most things isn't going to get a job done against Tank. It just isn't. One thing he's not a 6'7" at is his athleticism. He's not. That's an 8'9", maybe even higher. Because in that fight, he still looks like he had a lot left in the tank going into the championship rounds. And round 12, he kind of pulled it out the bag, if you like. So he's got that. But this is a guy that started boxing at 18. And this shows you just how tough boxing is. Because he's been boxing, Frank Martin's 29 now? So he's been boxing 11 years. He's had really good coaches. Derek James, one of the best out there. And it still shows you that even with some of the best coaches and 11 years of working on your craft, it's still very difficult to bridge that gap between the guys that have been doing it since they were 8, 9. It's almost impossible. The only way, and I've noticed this about guys that take the sport up late and girls, the only way they can bridge the gap is through their athleticism. That's the only way they can do it. And you can see it, like Chris Eubank Jr. is a good one. AJ is even a good one, right? They will make sure that they are as fit as humanly possible and athletic as humanly possible. But it's so difficult just to, when you come up against someone that has been boxing since they were 8, 9, you can just see that they're not on that level boxing wise. Again, physically, they try and bridge the gap physically. But in terms of boxing, it's just so difficult to bridge the gap. And I think Gervonta said it as well to him. They were doing like this sit down and Gervonta said it. He said, you've just not boxed long enough. And that's kind of crazy. Again, 11 years boxing, but you've just not boxed long enough. Think about this, for example. So he started boxing at 18. Devin Haney was having fights in Mexico at 15, professional fights against men. Think about that for a second. Devin Haney was boxing men in Mexico, because obviously it's illegal to fight beyond, I think until you're 16 in America or 17. So Devin Haney was fighting men at 15, 16 in Mexico, and Frank Martin hadn't learned how to lace up the gloves yet. So it's a difficult ask. It really is. And I think when the going gets tough in there, and it will get tough, I think Gervonta has better hand speed. Gervonta has better power. Gervonta is more experienced. I just can't see a way in which Frank wins this. I can't. He had a really good round 6 against his opponent, Artem, whose name I can't pronounce, sorry. And then he didn't know how to close the show in 6 and 7. I was like, okay, watching it back, I was like, okay, surely he makes adjustments here and tries to, no, just couldn't. So, yeah, I just don't see a way that he wins this fight. I'd like it to be competitive. I think it will be in the early rounds if he lets his hands go. He doesn't let his hands go enough as well. But I just feel like Gervonta is going to be too much, and I think Gervonta will sleep him. I really do. I think Gervonta will sleep him, and then we'll wait and see what Gervonta does. Remember, Frank was supposed to fight Shakur Stevenson. Gervonta's team at least picked Frank because they watched his previous fight and thought, no, we'll take that guy. He comes with some name value. He's unbeaten. He's aligned with Errol Spence. He's aligned obviously with Derek James. So he brings something to the table. Hence why people are interested in this fight, and hence why they chose him. And I get why Frank almost said no to the Shakur fight. Let's do the Gervonta fight. Bigger money, bigger profile, pay-per-view, like everything. It's just bigger, isn't it? But yeah, no. Again, this isn't a dig at him. It's very, very difficult. If you picked up the gloves at 18 and you're fighting guys that have been doing it since they were 9, some even younger, 8, 7, and they're as athletic as you, then once you get to that world level, you're going to find it very, very difficult. And I expect him to find it very, very difficult mid to late against Gervonta. I think adrenaline's going to get him through the first 4 or 5 rounds. I think he's going to look good. But Gervonta's then going to start reading what he does and is going to sleep him. I'm convinced of it. I'm really convinced of it. All right, let's have a look and see what there is. Richard Riakpor's trainer says all pressure is on belt holder Chris Billam-Smith. No. I hate this nonsense. It's not. Pressure is on both of them. Richard Riakpor is no spring chicken. He has got to win this fight, become world champion, and then get the unification fights and make some money. If Richard Riakpor loses to Chris Billam-Smith, I don't even know where he goes. I mean, look, there are some really good British cruiserweights out there, really good. So he can, if you like, drop down a level. But if you want to make that money, like Richard Riakpor will put his hand up to fight Jaya Pattaya. He'll do that, and he'll make that money in Saudi Arabia. So yeah, we'll see. WBA ordered Inoue to defend against Akhmadaliev, who wants to fight at Wembley in September. Looks like we're going to get Inoue. Imagine Inoue on this Wembley card. Jesus Christ. If you can picture what this Wembley card could be, and we're going to find out, there's a press conference in a week and a half, 2 weeks. AJ Dubois looks like it's nailed on, right? That's done. And then Wardley Clark, fingers crossed. Inoue Akhmadaliev on this as well. And you know they're going to go big. I mean, there's going to be more. That the other 3 or 4 fights on the card are going to be ridiculously big as well. So yeah, can't wait for it. Opataya waiting in the wings for Billam Smith. Riakpur win it. Yeah, just mentioned that. If I'm Opataya, I turn up. I don't think he's that kind of character to turn up, but I turn up and I just get in the ring. Honestly, I get in the ring and go nose to nose with the winner. Sometimes you've got to force these fights to happen. You can't always wait on your promoter or whoever. Sometimes force it. Just force it. I remember, what fight was it that Wilder had and Tyson Fury, I think, just went over the turnbuckle and went nose to nose with him. I can't remember what fight it was, but it sent like a, I can't think of the term, but obviously he almost manifested it, didn't he? And then eventually they're fighting. Sometimes you got to get in the ring, go nose to nose, and get the crowd and get the people excited about it. Pay-per-view piracy reaching a crisis point. Yeah, okay. This is an interesting conversation because it is, isn't it? Now some of you will say, yeah, fuck pay-per-view then. I mean, if the prices are so high, like they're the problem, that the broadcasters that are put, especially in America, in the UK, it's still, we don't get many pay-per-views in the UK per se. Obviously the ones in Saudi don't, I guess they kind of count, but you know what I mean? In terms of pay-per-view fights over here, it isn't as extreme as it is in America. And it's nowhere near the price as well. I mean, I don't know what Tank versus Frank Martin's going to be at the weekend, but I'm guessing it's going to be around $80, maybe more. That's the problem right there. $80. Like, as a fight fan, you know, the problem is, as a fight fan, you're having to pay for all these broadcasts and subscriptions anyway. Sky isn't free. DAZN isn't free. TNT isn't free. So you're paying just to kind of make sure you keep across all the sports or all the fights. And then you've then got to pay on top of that more money for the big ones. I don't know. I don't know what they do. The simple answer is scrap it, right? I mean, that's what DAZN's big thing was at the start of them coming out, right? It was no more pay-per-view, no more pay-per-view. Then they even realized, shit, we need pay-per-view. So I have no idea what you do, but it's clearly an issue because I think there were millions and millions of people that watched the Fury-Usyk fight illegally. So it lost hundreds of millions of pounds, basically. So, yeah, which shows two things. It shows that people are interested in watching it. That's the only positive you can take from that. But people just aren't willing to part with 25 quid. And if you're not willing to part with 25 quid for the undisputed heavyweight title fight, then I think these broadcasters need to look at this. It's true. We're not talking 25 quid for, I don't know, some B-level fight or even a high A-level. We're talking 25 quid for what was the biggest fight of maybe a decade. It's true, right? One of the biggest fights in the last 25 years. And people were still like, nah, fuck that, ain't paying. So, I mean, they do need to look at the pay-per-view and what they do with it. I don't know how. I don't know if this new Saudi-backed league that Turkey's talking about means that, I don't know. Say, let's talk about this very quickly. This Saudi league thing. So say it's like a UFC model, and so there's no more DAZN, there's no more Boxer, there is no more TNT, there's no more PBC, there's no more Top Rank. Saudi bought everything. Let's just live in this fantasy land. And for a month, the subscription was 50 quid a month to watch, I think he said 200 of all the best fighters, right? And no pay-per-view. I think people might do that. I think that's kind of the only way it would work. So you've got the elite of the elite fighting every single weekend, basically. But you're paying 50 quid a month for it. I think people would jump on that. I don't know, man. But look, I think pay-per-view is a problem. It's just tough out here now. Like you feel like you're having to, like, I've got all the subscriptions like you guys have got, by the way. And, you know, obviously I don't necessarily pay for the pay-per-views because I'm at them most times. But it's just, there's so much going on with like how much more money do people have? You just don't have the money. So what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do, man? No, it's just a tough one, isn't it? It's a tough one. Anything else? Okoli worried if Billam Smith has to swim in deep waters with Riakporhe. Well, Billam Smith was able to swim in deep waters with Okoli, so he can certainly do it. Dan Aziz feared he'd let people down in defeat by Joshua Boatsy. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, you fought. That's the best thing for us. You actually went in there and had a fight. You're fighting. You're giving us fights. So, no, you certainly shouldn't feel like you let anyone down. Not at all. All right, guys, girls, we are done. I might do a separate little video on Ben Whittaker, by the way. He's basically the reason I want to go to this Selhurst Park fight, just because I want to see him up close in person. I think he's an incredible fighter. But yeah, we'll probably do a separate video on what I think should be next for Ben Whittaker. Peace.